Hello, and welcome back to Gravetalker Films. I realize I've had a little bit of a hiatus. It's been more than a little bit, but I've had an actual hiatus from regular uploads. I seem to do this every year, and I talk about it and say I'm going to do more next year. We'll see. But today I'd like to talk about my top 10. It's closer to a top 5 because I have 5 unranked honorable mentions for films I really enjoyed, and then I'll go into my meaty kind of top 5 of the year that are already gaining some awards consideration. That's always nice to see. So my first honorable mention, which would be number 10 on my list of the year, is the new Superman, which I've seen twice. I saw it for the first time at a drive-in, and then I saw it for the second time in France with my brother at a movie theater there, and that was fun because he had spent 6 weeks in France and hadn't seen it, and so then we went out there to see him and bring him back home, and then we saw it, but we thought it'd be fun to go see a movie in France, and so he ended up watching that for the first time, and I watched it for the second time with him in France, which is just a neat experience. But I mean, in terms of being a film, I've never been a huge Superman fan, just the nature of the character and everything, but I thought it was a really well made, for the most part, well written and as well executed version of this character and of this world especially, that feels very comic booky, and it really embraces that side of that world. But it's very refreshing where I feel like it manages to balance some of the inherent goofiness of comics while also having some stakes and some characters who are have more layers to them a little bit, but it doesn't have all of that extra baggage of just nihilism and darkness that Zack Snyder brought to it. Which, don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for that. I think it opens the door really well for what Snyder wants to do with the rest of this world, which is, again, this is the second time we've seen the DC universe in film, like a full-on film universe, and this is the second iteration of that, and I feel like James Gunn has a really good handle on what he wants that to be. I'm interested to see what they do with Batman, because I don't know if it's gonna. I don't know if having like a darker, more comic accurate Batman would fit directly into this world of Superman that he's already created. But we'll get to that road when we cross it. But it was surprisingly well written. There was some interesting social commentary in there that I feel like everything now has some degree of social commentary that you have to comment on. But it was just, there was some cultural relevance to some of the things that they were hinting at, and not even if it was an intentional reference to modern events. It was when it was released, it kind of hit harder because of that, and I feel like that makes the film a little deeper and has some meat and some power behind it for that reason. I find that the writing is a little bit. I said it was well written, and I think it is, but there's moments when I feel like there's too much explaining, and that final scene when Superman kind of explains his role in the story and kind of his character to Lex Luthor, on one hand is satisfying to see, but then you really think about it and you think this is Superman just talking to Lex Luthor instead of it's show don't tell, and I find and then there was a little bit too much telling that kind of got on my nerves, and I look at the film and I go, I wish there was less of that, and that kind of colors my I look at it, because has all this cool action, flashy stuff, and then when it really gets into the the meat and bones of the whole story, then it's just kind of a conversation that. But besides all that preachiness, it understands the character, and I think that's what's most important. The film's title is Superman. It's about Superman. There's focus on other characters here and there, but it's about Superman, and it presents a version of Superman that's very true to what the character represents, and I think that's very important, and for that, it's my number 10. So my second honorable mention, or my number 9 of the year, whatever, ever want to look at that, is Predator Badlands, which I think it's kind of a different film compared to what some of the later ones on this list are going to be, and it's it's kind of like Superman in the regard that there's a lot of CGI. It's very comic booky, and it kind of feels like a version of Kong Skull Island with with a predator, but it strips away all the humans and it's just predators. It's just because there's multiple predators. It's just a predator hunting creatures, and there's carnage, and there's some surprisingly graphic PG-13 violence, which I didn't think was going to work, which I think a lot of us didn't think was going to work, but it did, and it was a lot of fun. But there's also a heart to it. I think that the whole found family story could wear thin at a certain point, with just the amount of films that kind of talk about that topic and that idea. But even though I love the Predator as a villain, it's pretty awesome to see a Predator that you can root for find some kind of found family there, and I think it's a new look at the character that I like more than I thought I was going to. From some discourse I've heard online and from other reviews and things like that, I am worried that Disney and Fox could get the wrong idea from what this film did right and say that this is what we're going to do with Predator now. I hope they don't do that, because I want to see more, Prey and Killer of Killers style Predator films where it's humans going up against predators and having to find different ways to take them out, and predators with more advanced technology than them. And I think that's a really cool story just to see play out in different ways that you do it. But I wouldn't mind getting a sequel to this and continuing the story of Deck, because I think they did a great job with him, and the motion capture was really cool, and it was just a neat version of this character that we've not seen before. It's not a Predator film that we're used to, but I think for what it is, and for just being a blockbuster that's well made with with great effects and everything, I think it's really successful at that. I just can't complain about getting a great Predator movie, and I thought this was pretty great. And I think that'd be my number 9 of the year. So my next honorable mention of the year is Wake Up Dead Man, the new Knives Out mystery as it's been marketed. I've seen the first 2 Knives Outs. I've had a lot of fun with them. I'm not super over the moon with either of them. I think they're both really well made, but I've just never been a massive fan of them. I don't really know why. But this one this one I think is probably the best of the 3. I don't know if that's a controversial statement. I've heard some people say they really like it. I've heard other people say it's not as memorable as the other ones. I think maybe, and maybe this is just like the just the edgy teenager in me, but I enjoyed the darker tone this one had. I feel like the other 2 were a little bit more black comedy, and I feel like this one, there's certainly some moments like that in this, but I feel like for the most part there was a bit of a darker, more somber tone to it that I enjoyed. I feel like it fit the story really well. I feel like there was very interesting character dynamic between Benoit Blanc and with Judd the priest. I've forgotten the character's last name, but I think Daniel Craig and Josh O'Connor play off each other really well, and I enjoy the fact that you kind of build up to Craig's introduction, and you really get to, because that character relatively enough in order to want to root for him, but you get a lot of the Judd character, especially at the beginning of the film, that kind of fleshes him out, and he's a very, and he plays off of Daniel Craig really well. And I think that knowing what about his character really kind of makes the film a little bit pack a little bit more of a punch in some places when there's more emotion to it, and I think kind of having that connection to its to the, not the main victim, but one of the people who's most deeply involved with the mystery, makes the mystery a bit more involving when you're not just looking at it from an outside perspective, but you're actually kind of in it with this character who's also trying to figure out along with kind of the genius detective. It's kind of like following Watson in a Sherlock Holmes book, even though it's a little bit different, but it has but has a dynamic kind of like that. I think I don't. Again, it's been a few years since I've seen the other two, but I think this is like easily the best shot. There's some really amazing shots in here, like especially when they're in the church and like you can see, like the way I thought about it was like there's clouds passing over the sun, and it's like the light is just changing inside this church, and it's like a neat visual cue that comes into play, like the last shot of the film, which that was really clever and really satisfying to see. And I do feel like it's a little bit long in the middle, and there's just like the middle is very dense with stuff that happens, and it's just a bit long, but I feel like for the most part it's really well paced, especially in its first and third acts. But Rian Johnson knows how to wrap up a mystery, and these three films are proof of that. I hope that this one was enough of a success, even though it was on Netflix. I hope it was successful enough to warrant another one, because I think this one's, not very often is the third film the best, and it's my opinion, but I think as of now, I think this is my favorite of the three, and it was a really effective mystery that it was a very effective mystery film that I really enjoyed. It was a lot of fun, very well made. Well, beautifully shot, well acted. I can't really complain about a whole lot in this one. So next on my list is 28 Years Later, the second sequel to 28 Days Later. I've not actually seen 28 Weeks Later as of right now, which maybe that kind of impacted my first viewing of this, but it's here on my list, so evidently I don't feel like I missed enough in order to kind of not enjoy this new one. I didn't think it was going to be super high, but the more I thought about it, and the more I kind of discussed it with a couple of people, and it just kind of stayed on the mind, the more I think it's a really great zombie film. And I don't know if I've done enough videos to talk about enough, but I'm a huge fan of Walking Dead and Last of Us and things like that. I love zombie fiction. I love apocalypse fiction in general, and with the conclusion of Walking Dead a few years ago, that kind of hurt my heart a little bit when it was over, even though the final season wasn't great. I was so sad because I enjoyed watching it, and even after the disappointing second season of Last of Us, I didn't realize I was kind of itching for another really good zombie story. And 28 Years Later is a little bit different because it's a movie and it's an hour and 45 minutes and not a 16-hour season of television. But in terms of like a technical production, with you have it being shot entirely on an iPhone 15, which I like to talk about even before it came out. I was like, man, this is cool that they're shooting this movie on an iPhone 15. Of course, it was like pimped out and had like all this stuff connected to it. So it wasn't just straight up a phone like I've shot movies on before. But I mean, that just gives it really unique visual style. The editing is really unique. Just kind of the use of just the mix of just the usual mix that films give you of visuals, of sound, of just things like that, and editing and things like that. It was all very unique the way this was done. It was just, I've not seen things like it, and I think some people could be easily turned off by the frenetic editing and like all the different weird like cuts to medieval times, things like that. Was certainly very was very experimental, but I think that's what made it so fun, was that there's just so much going on with, you're seeing kind of this new version of this apocalypse, which we've seen the zombie apocalypse hundreds of times before in various media, but we've not seen one quite like this, and I feel like the film reflects that, and we've not seen a film that looks or sounds quite like this one. And I think in terms of emotion, I might there's some brief spoilers here, but but the moment at the beginning, I don't even know, it does have a few endings. It does kind of have multiple ending syndrome, which is kind of weird, where there's multiple points where it could stop and I think it'd be satisfying, but there's several of those. But it's when the mother dies, that was one of that was probably the most emotionally raw thing I saw all year, and it was just like seeing that, I was like, oh my god, that's was just very emotional to see, and it was, I didn't expect to feel that going into this movie, and I think that just that alone puts it on this list. But just everything else from the characters, just the characters are a lot different than what we're used to seeing in this genre. And I think it was just a very unique film, and I'm not going to talk about things for too long here. I just want to kind of keep this a video not terribly long, but it was just a very unique version of the of the apocalypse, both visually and then on a narrative level. And I'm really excited for the new one that's going to come out this weekend, because I want to see how the story continues and where the characters end up going, because that cliffhanger was weird. I will say it was weird, but I kind of dig that about a apocalypse film, that we're going to present kind of different characters, and I think I like seeing that version of things, and I think it was a really unique film to see in the theater. So that's I guess that'd be my number 7 of the year. So I might say this right now, but 2025 was a pretty strong year for horror movies. I didn't see there was some weird ones, and I don't see a lot of the January releases and things like that. But I mean, I think I have like 4 horror movies on this list at least. My number 6, and just barely making the cut for being my top 5 of the year, is Companion, which was marketed as from the producers of Barbarian, which is interesting because then Zach Kerr comes along and does another film that's also going to be on this list later in the year. And I didn't see Companion until I think July. I did not see it when it came out, but I heard good things about it going in, and I guess I kind of figured the twist from just like seeing video thumbnails and hearing a couple of reviews. I didn't look too deep into it, but I think I figured out the twist. I'm not sure, but the thing I like about it is that you have the twist in the film, but then that's not all. It doesn't end with a twist. The twist is only part of the story. The twist is revealed only a third of the way into the movie, and then it just changes genres. And I think the biggest thing you can say about Companion, in every act of the film, there's something that is revealed, or something, some twist, some bigger than others, but there's something that kind of changes the game and kind of flips who you're rooting for and kind of changes your allegiance to certain characters. And I think that's a really interesting experience to go on with this film, that I certainly was not expecting. I was expecting one thing to happen, and I was expecting the central twist of the film, but not the other ones that it ends up going on, which I really enjoyed on the first watch of. And the last 25 minutes of the movie, where you're kind of getting to like the head of everything, and the final confrontations are going on, there was the moment where it's been a little bit since I'm forgetting the names. I think it was, they talk about how it's when she's in the ambulance, and the 2 companion doctors are talking about the robots and everything, and how people, and how, well, only men in particular, but just people will buy companions and just like torture them and just submit them to just this horrific stuff that you can't do to people, but since they're robots, they do it to robots. I watched that scene, and like, I just got this disgusting twisting feeling in my stomach. I was like, oh my god, there's something that's just really disturbing and sad about that, but that I found to be just annoyingly relevant, because to me that seems like something people would actually do if we had this kind of technology to be able to just buy love in a way. And then the fact that people would take advantage of that, it seems like that was disturbingly irrelevant. And I think that was what almost put it on my top 5 of the year. Was I gave this thing 4.5 stars. On Letterboxd, I thought it was a really effective horror movie. I think that the tone is very consistent throughout all of it. I think it was just a really well-made movie that had had some great twists, and had a really effective ending message about the role of women in society, and also just the role of technology. And I thought it was a really great movie in general. So we've now reached my top 5 of the year. This is actually kind of another ranking. And I don't like to do rankings as much as I like to list movies that I like, but I try to put these in an order so I could, kind of, it's hard to do a top anything without kind of ranking them a little bit. But I really enjoyed all these movies. I think my top two are, well, we'll see. They're all pretty close. That's why I had to kind of put them in order. But these are all really close, and these are without a doubt for me the best movies of 2025. And that if you don't care for the other ones on this list, these ones are definitely worth watching. I have a feeling a lot of people who watch movies have seen most, if not all, of these. But I think there's been some pretty awesome movies this year, and I think that these are the best ones of them. Okay. I think it's important to note there's a handful of movies I've not seen this year. Like I've not seen the new Frankenstein. People keep telling me to see it. I've just not gotten around to seeing it yet. I want to watch Train Dreams at some point. The American Society of Cinematographers Awards, which I've been following, just released, and that got a nomination there. I'd like to see that. Joel Edgerton got a Golden Globe, didn't win, but he got a nomination for a Golden Globe, which just passed this past weekend. I want to see that. I've not seen Bugonia yet. I've not seen any of any of that guy's movies, but I need to at some point. It's on my list to see, and I've not. I want it, and then at some point I want to see The Ugly Stepsister, which I heard about on. I saw the trailer for during Joe Bob one time back in April, I think, and I've been interested to see that. I've just not gotten around to it yet. So that being said, getting those ones out of the way, here are my top 5 movies here are my ranked top 5 movies of 2025. So to start out, I just talked about Companion from the producers of Barbarian. Well, director of Barbarian, Zach Cregger, delivered one of the best movies of the year with Weapons. I did my review about a few days after I saw it at the drive-in, so I'm not going to talk about it too much because you can see my review on YouTube. Well, I'm going to watch my review on my channel. But this was a really just exhilarating horror experience where there's horror, but there's a solid mystery. And I feel like it takes kind of a more art house approach to things, and kind of in taking a Pulp Fiction style chapter format, which I find which can be overused and be pretentious, but I feel like it works for this film really well. Has a great cast. I'm a bit disappointed that Amy Madigan didn't get the Golden Globe that she was nominated for, but the person who won, I think, deserves it, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But again, a great cast. I think the characters were very interesting. There was just very compelling characters, which I mean are hard to talk about sometimes in horror movies. But I think the characters were really cool here. I love the portrayal of a teacher, and because both of my parents are teachers. I believe I talked about this in my review, but my parents are both teachers, and I think it's there's something very relevant about teachers being under fire for things that they didn't do, but that people are blaming them for. There's something very relevant and timely about that I really enjoyed about it. And it was just a really well-made, not even a horror movie, but just a thriller that was just like really just gets you excited and very tense in moments. That was just really effective. I feel like the ending is a tonally different from the first 2/3 of it. And I think, the ending, when it gets a little bit crazier, I wonder if there was a little bit of a better, more intense way to do it. However, I feel like the overall package is pretty amazing, and just among one of the best horror movies of the past 25 years, without a doubt. Zach Cregger is he's going to become a pretty big name in horror, I can imagine, because he's in 2 pretty awesome movies back to back, and I think Weapons is is going to be the one to beat for him. And if he can do better than this, then he's gonna be an all-timer. I'm in the Horror Hall of Fame. So I really like this one. So that's my number 5. The nature of these lists, expect things to be in certain places. I didn't expect F1 to be my number 4 of the year because I feel like on a narrative level, the film is very simple. It's it doesn't pack a whole lot of surprises in there, because that's kind of the nature of sports movies in general. But seeing this movie on an IMAX screen was absolutely incredible. The whole story about how Brad Pitt and Joseph Kosinski had to come back and reshoot like half the movie with the new cars and everything after the writer's strike. The dedication to get this thing made is just super impressive. It's one of the best theater experiences I had all year, and that's my number 4. So this top 3 comes really close, but depending on the day, these could change, and they might well do that. My 2 and 3 could change around, but I think how this is pretty close to how I would expect it to be. And my number 3, kind of continuing with sports movies I didn't expect to have super high, Marty Supreme, which I saw 2 days before the new year started. I saw this at the Alamo Draft House with my brother and a friend of ours. We the 3 of us went, and I've not seen Uncut Gems. I've not seen other things from the Safdie brothers. Or this was just Josh who did this one, but I've not seen anything else he's done. But talk about just watching this thing and at 1 minute just kind of just clenching your toes and just wondering what's going to happen next, and the next one just laughing your ass off. It's friggin' hilarious. There's stuff that happens in this movie that we were trying not to laugh in this movie theater because it was like we were silently cackling at certain parts of this. See, this is after the Golden Globes. I'm recording this, so I'm aware that Timmy just won the Golden Globe, which is really awesome to see. The guy deserves it for this one. It's just there's just so much energy with this one, and it's not like F1 energy. It's full just fast dialogue, fast scenes, just so much going on, so many characters, but I think it all fits together really well. There's some I put this in my review on Letterboxd, not thinking it was a big part of the film, but I mean the production design here is really impressive, because they went to great lengths to recreate areas of 1950s New York in New York without rebuilding stuff on a soundstage. And one thing I talked about was I think the way it's shot, there's not a lot of establishing shots, which I find very interesting. A lot of it's very close on characters. There's like medium shots and close-ups on characters. It's very focused on the characters, but I think the production and the art direction, everything like that, adds to the film, but they don't focus on it too much, and so it doesn't feel like a period film in the regard that you have like this big opening shot of 50s New York. It's just there, and I think that increases the realism of the film, and that you don't feel like you're watching a romanticized version of the 50s. It just feels very raw, very realistic, very gritty, and again, maybe it's the edgy teenager in me, but I love movies that just go for it and go for grit and grime, and make that kind of the fabric of the film. And I think it's just really well made, really well acted. Again, especially Timothée Chalamet, just the guy deserves the award he's getting. And the soundtrack was really awesome. Everything about this was just firing on all cylinders. As I said with a couple other ones, I think it's a little bit long. There's a lot going on in the second act. A lot of double crosses, a lot of things like that that's going on to kind of just make things more stressful. And by the end of it, you're just kind of out of breath. And I can see some people not liking that, but I really enjoyed it. And I did not expect to be saying this, but if you can see this thing with friends, see it with friends if you want to laugh, because with the right people, this is just a really fun movie experience that I didn't expect to be as much fun as it was, and it's just a really well-made movie in general. There was a review I read that talked about that used a phrase that I want to use, but I don't want to steal. But it talked about how this movie is kind of a response to the modern day grind set culture, which I can agree with. I know people who are like that. It just kind of just go, like there's no time to breathe. We're just trying to get things done, and making a film about a guy who wants to be the number one table tennis player in the world, and it's just you don't think about that much, but then once you look into what all the stuff he's doing, just conning his way through things, and just messing everything up with everybody in pursuit of this, and just never having a moment to just breathe, I think is again, it's very relevant for today, and I think that's one of the special things this thing can do, is that it can be fun and it can be, just shocking, and but in a good way, in a fun way, but also just be relevant and just be an overall just amazing package of a movie that I had a blast with in the theater. So my number 2 of the year, I'm sure it's on a lot of people's list, probably close to the top like it is here, and that's going to be Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which I've seen twice now, and I actually saw for the second time. They re-released it in IMAX. It's my second time watching it, and if it wasn't going to be in my top 10 of the year on my first watch, it's certainly on here after my second watch in the IMAX, because it could just be IMAX bias, but seeing this thing in IMAX was just mind-blowing. There's, like I talked about with, I mentioned earlier the ASC awards, but in this year has some pretty incredible, I gotta say this word right, cinematographic achievements, and there's some pretty amazing looking movies this year. And this is including my number 1 on the list, which is also pretty incredible. But in my opinion, Sinners is just easily the best looking movie of the year. Just in terms of just the use of the IMAX format and the aspect ratio changes that everybody talks about. It was just so amazing to see on IMAX screen. Just the color correction and just everything they've done with the movie on a visual level is just stunning. Stunning is the word to use for it. And besides that, it's also probably the best sounding movie of the year. My brother's not going to be happy because he's a big fan of a movie that's, if you can believe it, higher on this list, but I think it's probably the best score of the year. I've listened to the score several times. It's absolutely amazing. This is after the Golden Globes. I'm recording this, and it just won the Golden Globe, which well deserved. Just a really incredible sounding film, and just in terms of writing, which I've heard some people criticize and talk about there's too much explaining. I don't have that problem with it. I think there's a lot of just really rich layers to this film where it's exploring so much on, it's a film about it's kind of a crime, like a Western crime movie, which is weird, but it's, one of my favorite subgenres of movies is I love the idea of like Westerns and crime and stuff like that. I think that's, when you mix those genres, it's a movie I'm already interested in watching, but then you bring in, vampire stuff, and then bring in the whole idea of, blues and how white people have appropriated the blues and just black culture in general. I think just adds there's like 4 layers to this movie that just every time, and the 2 times I've watched it, you just peel back more of it and just uncover more that's in this. It's pretty long, but I feel like it hustles along at a pretty great clip. I've heard some people say it could be a mini-series, and I would actually like to see it, kind of the way that Tarantino's re-edited, like Hateful Eight, into a 4-hour mini-series. If there was deleted scenes, I wouldn't mind having a mini-series based off of this. We have like an hour of episodes, something like that would be really cool to see. But just as a whole, it's just a really rich movie with just so much in there. When I first saw the posters, I don't even think I saw the trailer, but I saw the posters and I thought it was going to be a Michael B. Jordan action movie, but he ends up delivering a pretty amazing performance, and what I would say one of the best of the year. As he has the Smokestack Twins, he plays 2 characters, which is really well done. I believe, I don't know how to say his name, Miles Caton is how you say his name, as Sammy is probably my favorite supporting performance of the year. He does really awesome as kind of being your gateway into the world, and you're kind of seeing things through his eyes, which I think is a really unique way of looking at the film. And just some of the stuff in that mid-credit scene, just the first time I watched it, I was like, that's really cool, and I liked it. And then just a few days later, I thought about it, and then it kind of made me a little bit emotional thinking about it, where it's like when you wake up in the morning, you think about something, you're like, oh man, that really kind of hits you. And that ending hit me pretty hard, and I think an ending that sticks with you like that is really effective. And again, I think a lot of people will have this close to the top of their list, and it's by no means, a unique pick for your second favorite movie of the year, but just a really impressive achievement in filmmaking in general that I will look forward to rewatching at some point down the line, because I was a huge fan of this one, especially on the second rewatch. However, one thing I'd put above Sinners is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which I'll be honest and I'll say that a week before I saw this movie, I had never seen anything PTA had done. I've heard great things about Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood and A Punch Drunk Love and things like that. I watched Boogie Nights for the first time in preparation for seeing One Battle, because I wanted to just have one thing he had done, in my belt, so I kind of knew what I was walking into. But just a lot of the things I said about, F1 and Sinners just being just these, and even Marty Supreme just being like just these wild rides of movies that just pack so much into their runtime, just technical achievements, just great stories, great characters, and just in terms of just being, just great achievements in general. One Battle is all of these things. It has an amazing screenplay. It has awesome characters. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. It has an amazing soundtrack. It has great supporting performances. It just has everything that you could want out of a movie, as well as just being, and it's probably, biased, but it's a very relevant film for the year 2025. It's in my review that I wrote for my school newspaper, I talked about how I had heard I talked a lot about what other people have said. I guess it's kind of thing I've been saying a lot today. But I heard that there's people who think it's tone deaf, and that it was released at a bad time. It was like right around when there was some political assassinations in America and things like that. But there was no way that P.T. Anderson could have known that that stuff was going to happen, within weeks of his movie being released, and with all this stuff happening, and the fact that it was probably written a year and a half ago at least, just the fact that it can be so relevant now and have so much of an emotional impact is just really incredible. I think that, and it's the way I have to word these things is kind of weird, but there's the fact that the film opens up and it's these people raiding an ice facility, which again, you say the wrong way, it could sound bad, but just that was really cool to see. And just one thing I talk about here is that the way that white supremacists are portrayed in this film is just very interesting, where they're not portrayed as like these mustache twirling villains in the way that you would expect them to be. They're just portrayed as morons, and not morons as in like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel morons, but just literally just they think they're right and they think they make sense, and they really don't. And I don't want to get political in my reviews, but I mean, there's something that's just so funny about this, just this dead serious portrayal of just terrible people, that it's not making fun, it's just objectively showing how stupid the idea of white supremacy is. And that's just amazing to see in a movie theater among all this other stuff going on. And just to look just more at just the entertainment side of things, it has some heavy stuff going on with, again, with ICE, internment camps and white supremacy and, like border patrol and things like that. But it tells a huge story with just this massive scope to it, but it focuses on a father and daughter relationship at its core. And I think that, that's a common thing to explore in movies, but just not against this backdrop. And within that, you just have a lot of, again, a lot of great characters. The scenes between Leonardo DiCaprio and then Benicio del Toro, just the scenes with them are awesome to see. Any scene that Sean Penn is in, he's probably, and I don't need to rank all these things, but he's probably my second favorite supporting performance of the year. Just his swagger, the way he walks, the way he moves, just everything he does in this movie is just really amazing. And you hate him, but you can't help but kind of be invested in his story. And I think it's just the way that all of these sensitive topics are portrayed in a film that's equal parts exciting and emotional, and just you just are clenching your toes the whole time because it's tense, but it just is a gorgeously rendered work of cinema that is just everything that movies need and should be nowadays. Is just a really amazing film that is my vote for the best movie of the year. And if you want to read a little bit more about my thoughts a bit more recently after I saw it, I did a review on my school newspaper. I can link that down in the description. But I don't know how many people are actually going to watch this video, but if you've seen any movies from 2025, please put your ranking down below, because I'd love to see what other people think. I'd love to see what people think of these movies that I've listed here. I'm not trying to say that this is the best movies of the year. This is just my personal favorite movies of the year, and if you have any others that you think I should see, please suggest them, because I'm always willing to watch more movies, because the one thing you can't have enough of in life for me is movies. So thanks very much for watching. I hope that if you've not seen any of these, hopefully I've done a decent enough job of getting excited about seeing some of these movies, because there's some really good ones on here. I try not to talk about the whole people. There's an opinion on the film side of the internet where people say that movies are dead nowadays, and I think that at least my top 5 on here, my top 3 especially, are proof that movies are not dead, and that we're capable of having some amazing cinema, and that we have great filmmakers out there who just need to have the right stories, the right time, and just be able to let their visions loose, because there's been some genuinely amazing films to be released in 2025. So I'll see you next time, and keep on walking.